So we're going to start looking at DirEnv now. So DirEnv is a tool that's installed as part of the Linux build by default, and basically it's a shell extension that allows you to set environment variables when you enter a directory. The way it works, it checks for a file called .envrc in the directory and loads it if it exists. And it will then allow us to set various environment variables and things like that. Now, the way I've set it up to work in the labs is that it will just work automatically and the user doesn't need any permissions. That's done because there's a file called config.direnv.toml, and basically I've whitelisted the entire home directory. I haven't done it on the transfer drive. That could be added if you wish to. And the other thing is it doesn't print out the environment differences as you change directories. It's possible to do that. That can get a bit noisy and a bit confusing. So again, I leave it to the user. If you want more complex things, you can do this. But for now, this just sort of will work for the user's home directories and allow them to do things. So let's imagine the sort of scenario here that we've got at the moment. We've got this folder where we've got our Python project, and obviously we've also got a .venv here. What I want to do is when I change into this folder, I want to automatically activate the venv, because if I were to type Python now, obviously it's giving me 3.9.21, which is the default system Python, rather than the Python version that's part of the virtual environment. Because if I were to go to .venv bin and run Python, you can see that that's the 3.13.5. So what we're first going to do is we're going to type touch.envrc, and what that's going to do is create this empty envarc file. Now at the moment, obviously there's nothing in here. It's not really going to do anything useful. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of add in some setup from that. First thing I'm going to do though is make this font bigger because it's not really going. So this is, again, Z-Editor, tons of settings in here, and what you can see is a couple of fonts here. Let's make that 24, and let's make that 24, and save that, and that's a bit better. So now you can hopefully see that a bit better on the recordings there. So in my slides here, I've got an example that I quite often ship with my code base that I give to the students. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that, and he says not playing well. I'm going to copy that, then I'm going to go back to here, and then I'm going to paste that in. So what this is doing, it's exporting this environment variable called virtualenv, which is the current working directory .venv. If that exists, so I'm going to run uv.sync, so it's going to update any packages. If there is no venv there, so if there's no venv there, it's going to sync it. Then this path add function is a DirEnv function that just adds to the current path the virtual environment, and then it sets up the prompt as well, so we know that we're in a virtual environment. So by saving this, there are two ways of doing this. Because this action only works on directory change. If I were to type dirEnv allow, what that will do is it will load that and activate that. But the alternative is when I change folder, you'll notice there dirEnv is unloading, so it's unloading what was set up. If I type env like that, you can see a list of all the environment variables and things like that there. The virtualenv disable prompts and things like that. So if I now change into test project 2 env, you'll see that there's different prompts and things set up. But in particular now, if I type which Python, you'll notice that it's the current version of Python there. So I can type Python main.py, and it's using the correct Python. Ideally, what we need to do in here is to just go import sys to import the sys, and then in here we can say print sys version like that, and then that should hopefully make our life easier when I run that now. So you can see we've got 3.15 like that. So we're automatically activating the virtual environment. As soon as I change out of this now and I type Python -v, you can see I'm back to the system Python. And this has real advantages that by activating this, we can have multiple different versions of Python, multiple different environments and things like that set up, environment variables, all sorts of things that are specific to that folder and subfolders within that folder. As soon as we go back to normal, it's all deactivated. Now, there are some limitations with dir-env. In particular, aliases don't work in dir-envs. There are also setups for multiple languages. So these are known as auto layouts. So it's shipped with a number of layouts, and this can be sort of really useful if you want to start developing in different languages. Now, by default, obviously, we're concentrating on Python, but if you're beginning to do stuff, you want to do Node development so that you can install Node and do that. Same with Go, Rust, Java, Ruby, and so on. If you want to use Rust, there is already, because I've been using a bit, an installer in AppsHere for Rust to install Rust up. Other things, as and when you need it, the user can install in the home directory and then use the tooling and use dir-env to activate it. This is the current approach to doing any sort of custom development, that the user installs the tooling and then uses dir-env to set it up. I mean, if they're advanced enough to want to use different tooling, then they should understand how dir-env works, and there'll be other sort of elements about that. So the one limitation is that things like aliases don't work within a dir-env file. So in a .env-rc, basically for security, it runs in a restrictive, non-interactive shell context. So basically any aliases that you create in that do not persist. What we can do, however, is hook into Zscaler to load functions from another file. And again, I've set this up automatically. So if you look at the Zscaler RC, there is a function here called load dir-env Zscaler functions. And basically, if we export this dir-env Zscaler hook variable pointing to a file, we can then, on change present working directory, load those functions. And this works particularly well. So for example, and I'll demonstrate this in more detail later, in our ZenvRC, we can add something like this. So in this case, I've got export dir-env to be these Zscaler functions. So if I were to copy this, what I'm going to do is go into my env-rc here, and I will paste that in. Oops, he says, come here, paste that in. So I've got dir-env Zscaler hook dot functions, and I'll save that. Now what I need to do is create a new file in there. So I should be able to go control there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to define a function called hello Zscaler like that, and then something along those lines. Thank you AI for automatically generating that for me, as you saw. Zscaler functions.sh like that. So I'll save that there. So basically this file matches this name here. Now obviously we need to open a new terminal and change into it to get that to work. What we can do is in here, you can see I'm in that folder now. I've just opened a new terminal there, and what I can do now is, if you look, oops, I'm in there. I should be able to run the hello ZSHA like that. Nope, it didn't work. Hello ZSHA. No. Functions. I might have to just change and then change again like that. List my functions. Hopefully that's going to show them all in there now. Might not have worked just yet. I'll call it Hello ZSHA. Let's run that. There you go, it's working now. I had the wrong function name. So as you can see there, and go into there, it's working. So this becomes a very useful sort of setup as well. Again, what I do is I have a tendency to just ship these with a project. So the student gets their test code, they can go there, they can set it up. But obviously you can add your own scripts, your own bits and pieces and so on to it. As I say, later on we'll be using them for Jupyter to get a lot of things done. It is possible to also change this dir-env hook. So at the moment, it's the change present working directory. It's actually possible to do that on any change at all. There are various different ZSHA functions that you can add to this. Don't want to overcomplicate that approach. So in the next one, we're going to look at how we can run tools and how we can install tools using the UVX, which again is another one of these sort of quality of life improvements which will just help us to make things a little bit easier when we want to approach different projects.